Have you ever passed a stranger in pain and wondered, should I say something? What if one kind word could change a life forever? What if the person sitting next to you on the subway, silently crying, wasn't just a passenger, but a cry for help the world was too busy to hear? This is not just a story about kindness. It's about Zohran Mamdani, a New York City assemblyman who saw what most people ignore, a teenage girl in distress, alone, and breaking apart in public. But what he did next, it shocked even her, and it unraveled a journey neither of them expected, one that exposed wounds, injustice, and hope in the heart of the city. Why was she crying? Why did Zoharan stop? And how did one subway ride become the turning point in two lives? Keep watching, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after the video ends. I would love to know from which country and place you are watching my video. It truly inspires me to keep creating these powerful stories for you. The F train rattled through the Manhattan Tunnel beneath a sleeping city. At 11:47 p.m., Zohar Mamdani, fresh from a community town hall in Queens, leaned against a pole, reading over the notes scribbled in his planner. The air inside the subway car smelled faintly of oil and city grit. Seats were mostly empty, save for a sleeping man sprawled across two benches and a teenager sitting near the door, her knees hugged to her chest, tears silently sliding down her cheeks. Zoran noticed her as soon as he stepped in at 34th Street, not just because of her tears, but because of the way she sat, like she was trying to disappear into herself. He tried not to stare. New York taught its people to look away, but tonight something tugged at him. He closed his notebook and shifted to the seat across from her, watching as she wiped her face with her sleeve and looked down at a cracked phone in her lap. She couldn't have been older than 16. Zoran glanced once more before leaning forward. Hey, are you okay? The girl flinched, then nodded. Too quickly, too unconvincingly. He lowered his voice. You don't have to talk, I just want to make sure you're safe. The train rocked again. The man across the car snored. I missed my stop, she muttered, voice hoarse. Zoran offered a soft smile. Where were you going? She hesitated. Nowhere. He tilted his head gently. Nowhere's a hard place to get to, this late. She didn't laugh, not even a smirk. Her hands tightened around her phone. My name's Zoran, he said. I'm a city councilman. I know that's random, but I'm not here to bother you. Just if something's wrong, I can help. At the mention of councilman, her eyes flickered up, wary but curious. You work for the city? Technically, yeah, Astoria, District 36. But subway rides don't come with boundaries. She looked away again. Her shoulders shook once, then again. Finally, she whispered, They kicked me out. Zoran's heart sank. Who? My mom's boyfriend. She just watched. A cold silence filled the train car as it emerged briefly above ground, lights flickering through the windows like fireflies. I didn't do anything. Sorry, Lance. I didn't do anything, the girl added, her voice cracking. I just came home late from work. He said I was bringing shame and slammed the door. Zohran nodded slowly, anchoring himself in calm. Do you have anywhere else to go? Family? Friends? No one I trust? She wasn't crying anymore. She looked emptied out, like a glass spilled and left behind. Zoran knew the city well enough to understand the danger that hovered over teens like her at night, especially those invisible to systems, unclaimed by safety nets, alone. I know a shelter in Long Island City, he said softly. It's not perfect, but it's warm. They don't ask a lot of questions. Would you let me call them for you? She hesitated, then finally gave the faintest nod. Okay, she said, but I don't want to go alone. Zoran smiled gently. You won't. And as the train rumbled on toward Queens, the lives of two strangers, a teenage girl with nowhere to go and a councilman with too much on his shoulders, began to entwine in a way neither could have predicted. The subway slid into Queensboro Plaza, wheels screeching, lights flickering across steel beams like stuttering stars. The girl shifted closer to the door, but not to run. Her hands were still wrapped tightly around her cracked phone, but her breathing had steadied. Just a little. What's your name? Zoran asked gently, still seated across from her, his elbows resting on his knees. She stared at the floor, then up. Her voice came like a whisper, too afraid to be heard. Aliyah. Zoran smiled, nodding once like a promise. Aliyah, that's a beautiful name. She shrugged, pulling her hoodie tighter around her shoulders. He said it sounded like a stripper's name. Zoran's face twitched, a flicker of rage tucked beneath a blanket of empathy. He didn't react outwardly. She didn't need anger. She needed someone to listen. Well, he said calmly, he's wrong. It means strength in it. In Arabic, it's a name with strength in it. Aaliyah blinked. She hadn't known that. And it showed. The train rolled on. I'm gonna call someone at the shelter now, okay? Zoran said, pulling out his phone. You don't have to say anything. I'll just explain. Aaliyah nodded, her voice caught in her throat. Zoran stepped a few feet away and made the call. Soft, professional, clear. He explained that she was young, possibly a minor, emotionally shaken. No physical injuries, no prior records, no bag, no guardian. The woman on the other end, Miss Irene, said they'd hold a bed. I'll stay until intake finishes, he added quietly. Then I'll make sure she's okay. He hung up, turned back to her. They're ready for you. It's a few stops away, just a short walk. Aaliyah didn't speak for a moment. Why are you helping me? She asked. He sat down beside her this time, not too close, not invasive. Because someone helped me once, he said. Because no one should have to survive a city like this on their own. She looked at him, eyes still swollen but steadier. You don't even know me. You're right, Zoran said, voice even. But I see you. That silence returned, not empty now, full of something unnamed. Like the first thaw after winter. When the train pulled into Court Square, they stepped out together. Above ground, the city had quieted. Storefronts blinked closed, and streetlights hummed above them. Zoran offered his coat. She hesitated, then accepted. Her frame was smaller than it looked in the subway, like she shrunk from too many bad days. The shelter stood 2 blocks away, a squat building with chipped bricks and a heavy steel door. Inside, a social worker greeted them with tired but kind eyes. Zoran stayed close, but let Elia speak when she was ready. When the worker asked for her name, she said it louder this time. Elia. Just Elia. Zoran smiled quietly. As they filled out the form, Zoran glanced around the shelter, peeling walls, flickering lights, staff overworked. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Safety, however temporary. When the intake was finished, Aaliyah turned to him. Thank you, she said. I didn't think anyone would care. He swallowed something sharp in his throat. I'll check in tomorrow, he said gently. But for tonight, you rest. You're safe now. She gave the faintest smile. As Zoran stepped back into the cold, his phone buzzed with missed calls, texts, political emails. But tonight, none of that mattered more than the quiet weight of a name spoken aloud in trust. Aaliyah next chapter. The shelter isn't the end. Aaliyah adjusts to life among strangers and curfews, but the trauma she carries doesn't sleep. Meanwhile, Zoran faces criticism for stepping away from a crucial campaign event, and the city starts to ask questions. 2 lives pull at opposite ends of responsibility, but fate isn't done linking them yet. The shelter smelt like soap and exhaustion. Aaliyah lay on a narrow cot wrapped in a too thin blanket, staring at a ceiling dotted with water stains. Somewhere down the hall, a girl was crying into a pillow, her sobs rhythmic and hollow. Aaliyah didn't cry. Not now. Not anymore. She stared at the little paper bracelet on her wrist. Name, date, intake time. It felt like a tag, not a welcome. The room she shared had 3 other girls. One of them, Maria, was already curled into a ball, hoodie over her face. Another, Jay, wore headphones and chewed gum like it was armor. The third, Destiny, gave Aaliyah a small nod when she walked in. Earlier, this place sucks, Destiny had said matter-of-factly. But it's better than a basement. Aaliyah didn't respond then, but now, lying in the dark, those words stayed with her. At 7:12 a.m., the fluorescent lights buzzed to life. A staff member knocked once before pushing the door open. Wake up, girls. Breakfast at 7:30. Counseling sessions posted on the board. Jay groaned. Maria didn't move. Destiny sat up slowly and glanced at Aaliyah. You knew? Aaliyah nodded. I've been here 6 months. Ain't forever. Just get through it, day by day. Aaliyah forced a small smile that was all she could manage across the East River. Zohran Mamdani was seated in his campaign office in Astoria, facing a full team, some supportive, some visibly frustrated. You ghosted the fundraiser, Zoran, said Priya, his communications director. Donors notice, media notice. We had to make up a story about a transit delay. He exhaled. There was a girl. We know, he said, softening a little. We respect that, but optics matter. You're running for mayor. You can't keep disappearing without telling anyone. He leaned back in the chair, eyes weary. What am I even running for if I can't show up when someone actually needs help? Silence. Then a voice from the back. Do you know what happened to her? Zoran shook his head. I'm checking in today. They moved on, talk of polling numbers, neighborhood outreach, and a Sunday speech in Harlem. But Zoran's mind stayed in that dim subway car, with a voice too small for the world around her. Back at the shelter, Aaliyah sat in a small plastic chair across from a counselor. Her name was Miss Shireen. She wore thick glasses and asked questions so gently, they barely sounded like questions. Do you feel safe here, Aaliyah? I don't feel anything, she said. That's okay, Shireen replied. Not feeling is something too. We can work with that. There were more questions about school, about her mother, about the night she was kicked out. But the only thing Aaliyah said in full was, he told her to choose. And she didn't pick me. Shireen just nodded, like she had heard that sentence before, too many times. At 4:15 p.m., Aaliyah sat by the window in the shelter's common area, staring at the street. She wasn't expecting anyone, but part of her hoped, and then through the wire mesh glass door, she saw a familiar silhouette. Tall, glasses, wrapped in a scarf against the wind, Zohran. He signed in with the receptionist, then looked toward her. Their eyes met. He smiled. She didn't smile back. But she stood up. You didn't have to come, she said quietly as he approached. I know, he replied, but I wanted to. A pause. Something fragile filled the space between them. I think, she hesitated. I think I might want to go back to school. Zohar's face lit up, not with pity, but with respect. Then that's where we start, he said. And in a world that often demanded people fix everything overnight, Zohran chose to stand with her in the slow, uncertain work of starting again. It started with a single tweet. Saw NYC Councilman Zohran Mamdani helping a teen girl in tears on the F train last night. He gave her his coat, stayed with her till she got help. This is what public service should look like. The post had 300 likes by morning. By lunchtime, it had gone viral. By evening, Zoran's name was trending, half praise, half suspicion. The news outlets weren't far behind. Subway, Samaritan, or PR stunt. Councilman Mamdani spotted aiding teen on NYC train. Candidate for mayor leaves fundraiser to help runaway girl. Hero or reckless? Exclusive. Who is the girl Zoman Mamdani helped and why the city's CPS wants her back home? Zoman stared at his phone in disbelief. I didn't even tell anyone, he muttered. I know, said Priya, scrolling beside him, but someone did. And now everyone has an opinion. The campaign office was buzzing. Reporters outside, donors calling staff, split between pride and panic. I just wanted to make sure she was okay, Zoran said, rubbing his forehead. And you did? Priya said, but when you're running for office, people will twist even that. He looked out the window. He wasn't worried about himself. He was worried about her. At the shelter, Aaliyah's counselor handed her a folded sheet of paper. Court reconciliation notice, Child Protective Services. Preliminary action required. They want you to go home, Shireen said gently. Aaliyah froze. Her throat tightened. No, she whispered. No, I told you what he did, what she let him do. I know, Shireen said. But technically, your mother's listed as your legal guardian, and since you're 16, I'm not going back, Aaliyah said. Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. Outside her room, whispers floated through the halls. Girls showing her the news. Girls laughing, some jealous, some curious. You know him? Is he your uncle? I bet you're set now, huh? Aaliyah stayed silent. She didn't ask for attention. She didn't want to be anyone's story. That evening, Zohran returned. She met him in the courtyard, where the chain link fence couldn't keep out the sirens, but at least let the sky in. They want to send me back, she said flatly. He didn't answer at first. I can't stop the system, Aaliyah, he said carefully, but I can stand with you while we fight. She looked at him, eyes fierce now. Everyone thinks you saved me, but no one sees what comes after. I do, Zoran said. You think I don't know what it's like to carry things people don't see? A beat passed. Then she asked, barely above a whisper, are you going to leave too? Zoran crouched so they were eye level. I'm not your father, I'm not your savior, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, unless you ask me to. And for the first time in days, Aaliyah nodded. Not to agree, but to trust, just a little. The courtroom was small, gray, and colder than it needed to be. Aaliyah sat on a wooden bench near the front, wearing the nicest clothes the shelter could find, a plain navy sweater, black jeans, and shoes that didn't quite fit. She looked small, but not broken. Zoran sat 3 rows behind her, dressed in his usual scarf and glasses, his councilman's pen discreetly tucked into his coat pocket. He wasn't here as a politician. He was here because she asked him to be. A woman from CPS stood and read out the report. Minor presented at emergency shelter intake on Friday evening. Claims emotional abuse and neglect. Guardian has denied all allegations. No prior CPS investigations. Guardian is requesting the child be returned home. Aaliyah didn't flinch, but her hands were curled so tightly in her lap, her knuckles turned white. Then her mother entered. No one told her that seeing her again would feel like falling down an elevator shaft. Same eyes, same scarf, same cold. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just sat there, like Aaliyah was a stranger she'd once rented a room to. Miss Aaliyah, do you wish to return to your mother's home? No, she said, clearly. The judge glanced over his glasses. Can you explain why? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Zoran leaned forward, just a little, willing strength into her from across the room. She finally spoke. He told her she's between me and him, and she didn't pick me. Silence. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you mean your mother's partner? Aaliyah nodded. Did he ever physically harm you? No, she admitted. But he didn't have to. The judge nodded, expression unreadable. Thank you. Then, a surprise, Councilman Zohran Mamdani, you requested to speak? Zor stood, heart pounding, not because of fear, but because of weight. This wasn't a hearing, this was a life. He stepped forward. I'm not her family, I'm not her teacher, I'm not her caseworker. I met Aaliyah 5 days ago, on a subway, alone. Crying, he paused. I didn't approach her as a politician, I approached her as a human being. As a New Yorker who's seen too many kids fall through cracks they didn't create. She's not running from trouble, she's running from betrayal. And what she needs now isn't a courtroom lecture or a report. She needs a chance to stay safe, stay grounded, and be heard. The judge watched him closely. And why does this matter so much to you, Councilman? Zoran exhaled, because I know what it's like to be 15 and afraid no one sees you. And I know what it means when someone finally does. The courtroom went still. Even Aaliyah's mother blinked. Afterward, the judge called a brief recess. Aaliyah sat beside Zoran in the hallway, knees bouncing. Do you think he believed you? She asked. I don't know, Zoran replied, honestly. But I meant every word. She looked at him. You didn't have to come. I know. A long pause. Thank you for picking me, he said softly. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Later that afternoon, the decision came. Temporary protective order upheld. Aaliyah would remain in city care, not sent home. Further evaluation in 30 days. It wasn't forever, but it was enough for now. The key was silver and smooth. It slid into her palm like a secret, this is your space, the caseworker said as she led Aaliyah down the hallway. It's part of our transitional living program. Girls who've proven responsibility, emotional stability, and school commitment get their own room. Aaliyah stepped inside. It wasn't fancy, a twin bed, a desk, a chip dresser, but the door locked, the window open, and no one told her when to breathe. She ran her fingers across the edge of the desk. She'd never had a room that was hers, not like this. Not really. The next morning, she woke up before sunrise, folded the blanket neatly, and walked 2 blocks to the bus stop with her new student ID badge in her pocket. Midtown High School felt too big, too loud, but she kept her head down and moved through it like she was underwater. Slow, quiet, invisible. Until a girl in art class whispered, I saw you in that news video. You're the girl from the subway, right? Aaliyah froze, but the girl didn't ask anything else. She just passed her a pencil. People talk, she added, but not everyone's cruel. Aaliyah tucked the moment away like a note in her shoe. That afternoon, Zohran sat in his office, rereading the letter on his desk for the third time. This is a formal notification that an ethics complaint has been filed regarding your personal involvement with a minor receiving city services. While no laws appear broken, your actions raise questions of boundary overreach and political optics. It was unsigned, but it was printed on city letterhead. Someone's trying to smear you, Priya said, pacing. They're using the girl to do it. Zohran stayed silent. Do you want to respond? He looked out the window, down at the people on Steinway Street. No, he said, not yet. Let them talk. Back in her room, Aaliyah unpacked the 3 shirts and 1 hoodie she owned. She folded them slowly, careful not to wrinkle what little she had. Then her phone buzzed. 1 new voicemail, unknown number, New Jersey area code. She stared at it for a long time before pressing play. A man's voice. Aaliyah, it's James. I don't know what lies you're telling people, but you need to come home. Your mother's sick over this. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? You're making a fool of us in public. Enough. Clicker hand shook. She threw the phone across the bed. Not to break it, just to get it away. For the first time since the courtroom, tears filled her eyes. But this time, they weren't from fear. They were from fury, because he still thought he owned her story. That night, she messaged Zohan for the first time. Aaliyah, do people ever try to scare you when you won't back down? He replied, a minute later, Zohan, all the time. That's usually how I know I'm doing something right. She stared at the screen, then typed, Aaliyah, I think I want to tell my story for real, but on my terms. Would you help me figure out how? The flyer read, Youth Power Rising, a night of truth and transformation, hosted by The Root House, a grassroots group amplifying survivor voices across NYC. Aaliyah's name wasn't on the flyer, just anonymous survivor speaker. But the moment still felt too big. Zoran met her outside the event hall, a converted church on the Lower East Side, just as dusk settled over the bricks like soot. You sure? He asked, voice calm, scarf tucked under his coat collar. Aaliyah clutched her folded pages in one hand. No? He smiled. That's the right answer. Inside, folding chairs filled quickly. Teens from shelters, social workers, teachers, and a few quiet reporters took seats. A panel had spoken before her. A boy who'd survived Rikers. A girl who ran from foster care. Each voice fragile and furious. Then it was Aaliyah's turn. She stepped up to the mic, papers trembling, heart louder than the applause. She looked down, then up, and began, My name is Aaliyah. And for a long time, no one believed I existed. I lived in a home where silence was survival, where you learned to disappear to stay safe, where the people who say they love you only do when no one else is watching. I wasn't hit, so I thought I couldn't call it abuse. I was just erased. Until one night on a subway, I cried in public, which I never do. And someone noticed, not because he's famous, not because he's perfect, but because he was there. She glanced briefly at Zoran, who sat offstage, eyes low, hands folded. He didn't fix me. No one can. But he saw me, and that opened a door. And I walked through it. And this city has thousands of kids like me. You just don't see us because we learned to stay out of the way, but we're here. And we're not your headlines. We're not your hashtags. We're people. And we deserve better than survival. When she stepped back, the silence was immediate. And then thunder, applause, cheers, a standing ovation, tears on strangers' faces. Outside, though, the air was different. A cluster of protesters had gathered across the street. Not many, but loud, holding signs that read, Mamdani exploits children and protect families, not runaways. Camera flashes popped as Aaliyah exited the building. And that's when she saw him. James, her mother's partner across the street, arms folded, watching. He didn't move, just stared. Her blood turned to ice. For a second, the ground swayed, but then Zohran stepped beside her. You don't have to face him, he said quietly. I already did, Aaliyah whispered. Every day for years. She turned, walked past the cameras, past the noise, head held high. That night, her speech was uploaded to YouTube. By morning, it had 60,000 views. By afternoon, 200,000. And by evening, her name was finally on something she chose. Not a file, not a report, a story. Her story. And the morning after the speech, Aaliyah sat by the window of her small room, watching the city wake up. Her phone buzzed every few minutes. Strangers writing from Los Angeles, Atlanta, even Nairobi. Your story gave me courage to leave. Thank you for speaking what so many of us are afraid to say. You're not alone. She didn't reply to all of them, but she read every word. Then, just after noon, her caseworker knocked softly. There's been a development. Aaliyah looked up. They're reopening your custody case. She said your mother's attorney filed an emergency petition, claims you've been influenced and exploited for political gain. Aaliyah's stomach dropped. Can they do that? The caseworker sighed. Technically, yes, but I told the truth. Sometimes the system doesn't care about the truth. It cares about order. Meanwhile, in a downtown studio, Zohran sat beneath bright lights, facing a panel of challengers in a live mayoral debate. He knew it was coming, and it came fast. Councilman Mamdani, barked a former NYPD commissioner turned candidate. You left a major fundraiser to help a teenage runaway and then stood by while she publicly slandered her family. Is that your idea of responsible leadership? Zohran didn't flinch. My idea of leadership, he said, is showing up for the people the system forgets, not just the ones who fund campaigns. But she was a minor. She was a person, he cut in. And if we spent half as much time listening to kids like Aaliyah as we do trying to control them, this city might not be drowning in cycles we pretend we can't fix. Another candidate smirked. So you admit it. You made her a symbol. Zoran's gaze sharpened. No, she made herself a voice. I just refused to silence it. The studio buzzed, Twitter exploded, and across the city, in her tiny room, Aaliyah watched the debate on a flickering shelter TV, her breath caught in her chest. For the first time, she saw a man defend her, not as a victim, not as a pawn, but as a person with power. She felt something shift, not just outside, inside. The next day, Aaliyah met with a new lawyer, a volunteer from a youth advocacy group who offered pro bono defense. She's not going back, Zohran said quietly as he waited in the lobby. We'll fight it, the lawyer nodded. But we'll need more than emotion. She has facts and fear, the lawyer added. That matters too. Later that night, Aaliyah pulled out her notebook and wrote, They think I'm being used, but they don't know what it's like to be used and stay quiet. This time, I'm using myself, my voice, my hurt. And maybe they don't like that. Maybe they shouldn't. She tucked the paper under her pillow. She didn't sleep easy, but she didn't hide. Aaliyah hadn't planned to speak. Her new lawyer had prepped for weeks, gathering reports, letters from teachers, a psychologist's affidavit. The legal path was strong. But when she walked into the courtroom and saw James sitting behind her mother, his arms crossed like nothing ever happened, her hands began to shake. Not with fear, with clarity. The judge entered, a different one this time. Young, sharp-suited. The judge, she didn't have the famous lawsuit with a reputation for strict family preservation policies. The bailiff called the case number, and then the questions began. Ms. Alia, do you still oppose returning to your legal guardian's home? Yes, she said, for my safety. Have you experienced physical abuse? No, she admitted. But that doesn't mean I was safe. Her mother stood. Your Honor, my daughter is being fed lies. She's confused. This man, she pointed to Zohran, seated at the back, has convinced her I'm the enemy. Aaliyah rose without prompting, Your Honor. She said clearly, can I say something? Fine. Here it is. When I was 12, he started locking the fridge when my mom wasn't home. When I was 13, he read my text and called me a slut. When I was 15, he told me I was nothing and my mother said nothing back. She turned to her mother. You didn't hit me, but you let him control me, like I was a stranger in my own life. And when he made you choose, you looked away. That was your answer. Silence. Then she turned back to the judge. He's sitting here today, like he owns this room, but he doesn't own me anymore, and neither does fear. So please, if you're going to rule something today, let it be that I matter. Not just on paper, not just in news stories, but here, in this system, in this city. She stepped back. Her lawyers stared at her speechless. The judge looked down at his notes, face unreadable. James shifted in his seat, his arms no longer crossed. Her mother said nothing. The court was silent. Then, order, granted. The judge said, the minor will remain under state protective care with no mandatory reunification, future status review in 6 months, court adjourned. Aaliyah didn't cry. She didn't smile, but she breathed. For the first time in years without guilt pressed against her ribs. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted. Dozens of young people stood with signs, let her stay free, believe survivors, justice for Aaliyah Zohran, found her just off the steps. He didn't hug her. He didn't say anything at first. She broke the silence. You think it's over now? He looked at her. No, I think it just began. But this time, you're writing the script. She nodded, then whispered, let's make the ending count. The campaign office buzzed like a hive of nerves. Poll numbers tightened, media attention soared. The final rally at Union Square was projected to draw thousands. But one question divided the room. Should Aaliyah speak? She's a lightning rod, Priya warned. Half the city loves her, half the city thinks Zohran used her. She wants to speak, Zohran said, and it's her story. No one owns that. But if she speaks, another aide said, you could lose Staten Island. We could lose the whole thing. Zohran looked down at the speech draft on his desk. It wasn't about politics anymore. It never really was. Meanwhile, Aaliyah sat in a library downtown, across from a lawyer in a dark gray suit. He smiled thinly. We represent a fund that supports youth services and education. We'd like to offer you a scholarship package. Housing, therapy, tuition for college. She blinked. Why? Because your story matters, and we believe you have a future. She narrowed her eyes. What's the cat? He hesitated. Well, the donors asked for one small condition. You step away from the public eye. No more speeches, no more headlines. Just live quietly. Silence. Then Aliyah stood. You want me quiet because I make people uncomfortable, she said. But discomfort is what made people listen. She turned to leave. He called after her. You'll regret turning this down. She didn't even look back. That night, Union Square overflowed. Thousands stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the stars, holding candles, posters, hope. Zohran stepped up to the mic. Applause thundered. But instead of speaking first, he turned to the side and called her name Aaliyah. She walked slowly onto the stage, denim jacket tight over her shoulders, braids pinned back, chin held high. The crowd quieted. She took a breath, then spoke. Some people think I'm here because someone saved me, but I'm here because someone saw me and reminded me I was already worth saving. We live in a city where survival is treated like a skill instead of a wound, but it shouldn't take a viral moment for people to care. So, I'm not asking you to vote for someone. I'm asking you to see the people you don't notice on your way to the office or on the train or behind a checkout counter. And if you do vote, vote for someone who listens to those voices, even when it's not convenient. Believe it or not, voting for someone and not knowing your vote, voting for someone who listens to those voices, even when it's not convenient. She stepped back. The crowd erupted, not in claps, but in roars, raw, real, thunderous. 2 days later, the results came in. Zohran won by 6,412 votes. He didn't credit strategy, money, or even the speech. He credited truth and a girl who refused to disappear. Epilogue. 6 months later, Aaliyah stood outside a public high school in Harlem. She had just finished her first day as a peer mentor, helping girls like her find steady ground in an unsteady world. Her scholarship, paid for by people who heard her and believed her voice, stronger than ever. She still had therapy, still had quiet nights where her hands shook and she didn't know why. But she also had a key, a desk, a journal full of pages that no one would edit but her, and a single framed photo near her window. Her and Zoran on the subway platform, both looking forward, both finally safe.